Well, thank you so much, Keith. We're so glad to be here for the Next Right Thing. And we're talking about interior peace today. And Adam, I really wanted to focus on John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. There's a lot said in this one verse of this passage in Scripture, but it's a different kind of peace, Adam. And I noticed that today in this world, people are struggling to maintain an interior peace. There's a lot of agitation. I just saw recently a video at I believe it was a Chuck E. Cheese, kid entertainment center, where they play games and all sorts of arcade stuff and have pizza. And I believe it was in Houston, Texas. And there was a big brawl. I mean, adults were just fighting and going at it. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, these children are going to be traumatized. People are unable to seem to be able to maintain that peace and hold on to that peace. What do you say to all this?
Well, Deb, it's a topic that runs through a lot of Scripture, and of course for good reason. So, if we take the language that you opened with, Jesus saying, be at peace, don't be anxious, don't be afraid, I leave my peace with you. Remember, that's in the context of the Last Supper, where he is letting them know about so many rough things that are coming for them. Right? He's kind of letting them know over time, increasingly clearly, that he's going to be leaving them, that he's going to, from their perspective, die, in the sense of dying permanently. Like they're going to be confused until he comes back. And they're going to suffer persecution for his namesake. They already have seen that. And he lets them know, like, it's going to get worse. So he's saying, like, your life with me is going to be hard. And it's going to be more intense, after I'm gone. But be at peace. I'm giving you peace in a different way than the world does. So it's a really fascinating contrast. And I think you can see it play out in the life of Paul so clearly in his letters. Sure. When you start putting things together with Paul, here's a guy who is traveling around, He's launched into his ministry by Christ himself on that trip to Damascus. And he talks about being imprisoned, and he's poor, and he's weaving and making rugs to get by and buy food. He's, writing letters long distance, trying to console a lot of people and teach a ton of people. He's running all over the place. And he's got all these difficulties. He's got pain in his body that he talks about, this thorn in his side that he prayed that God would free him from. And yet he opens his letters, a slave to Jesus Christ, and all this language about he's joyfully with Jesus and serving Jesus, and closes his letters in the same way. And in the midst of them, you find out, like, oh, he's in prison, and now he's starving.
Right.
And so you really see Paul live it out clearly. And I think you see that in with some of the other apostles. You'll see it spelled out, though I know they all had a hard time. So this idea, when we apply it to our lives today, like, it's just as applicable. And everybody's going to have trials. We talk about this veil of tears. Everybody's going to have if you live long enough, you're going to have difficulty, you're going to have loss, you're going to have stress, you're going to worry about the worldly stuff and paying the bills and everything else. And those are real concerns.
Afraid of what's going on in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Anxious about the news, that we live with, and the internet drama and all this stuff. And I think what Scripture is trying to help us do is to kind of rise above that interiorly. So you do deal with the world. You still go to work and pay your bills and try to take care of things. But in an interior sense, you try to maintain that peace with Christ, because that peace is based on the goal of making it to heaven, to making it to the beatific vision, right? Ultimately, this is a short life. And, as the years go on, it becomes so increasingly obvious how short it is. And you always hear that from older people, right? Life is short, do things now.
Right.
So this idea of being at peace inside, even while you're dealing with the world, frees you up to enjoy the gift of life. And when you put it in the context of, well, I'm going to be here for, hopefully 60, 70, maybe 80 years, maybe more, but that's a drop in the bucket in terms of human history, right? The scripture talks about a blink of the eye is could be 1,000 years to God. It's just an analogy. It's not literal. So I'm here for a very short time. Enjoy the fact that I'm alive. I'm grateful to right now have health and I'm breathing, and like the fact that I have a future to look forward to with Christ.
Right.
So I think that it's trying to encourage that. Go ahead.
Well, but you just said something there that, Adam, that sounds great. But when you're living life, when you're doing life, okay, and then to maintain that bigger view, that's really hard sometimes because you get sucked into this world really easily. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's why the tradition of like the divine office, the breviary, which you start the day with prayer and some readings to give you something deep to focus on in terms of, some really solid theology. And then you pause at 9 o'clock and you pray for a few minutes, and you pause at noon and you pray for a few minutes, and you pause at 3 p.m. and then you pause at the end of your day, typically your work day, and then you have evening prayer right before you go to bed. I think what that tradition, and you see this, down through the centuries, this tradition builds up of punctuate the day with prayer to hold that awareness, because without that regular prayer, and of course, Paul talks about praying ceaselessly, right? So generating some kind of internal prayer, but the church gives us this breviary. We don't all have to pray it. The priests do. They promise to pray it. That's, I think, what it does. It's kind of very Benedictine, pray and work. Right.
So what you're saying is tap God all day long in order to maintain this awareness, to keep this higher level, to not get drawn into the world, right? To stay one step above the world.
Yeah. And especially like...
That makes sense.
You hear those things when you're growing up, like, okay, well, count to 10, things like that you hear usually when you're little. Like if you're losing your temper or you're getting really flustered and frustrated, count to 10, basically take a time out mentally. This is a way to do that, but with God, use a Hail Mary and Our Father and a Glory Be as your count to 10, or something along those lines, maybe a prayer that really works for you, maybe your favorite saint, you can, ask them to pray for you. And I think it's a way to kind of reorient the internal compass.
Sure.
Because the world wants us to get flustered and start reacting emotionally, because then we're easier to control, right? So advertising uses fear to grab our attention, and then fear to motivate us to spend money, and of course do it quickly while your emotions are running high.
Yeah,
before
don't think about it.
Yeah, before you have time to think about it.
Pull out that credit card.
Right. That's why you always see in sales like act now, because if you have a cooler head and think about it, you're going to realize, well, this is silly. So to rise above all that and try to have a calm interior, I think it's about the interior life being like protected and guarded. And you see this analogy in like the heart, and protecting your interior peace with a number of the saints too. Easy to say, I know it's easy to say. But it's something you can practice and you can get better at.
Right. And I love looking into kind of the clues of each, sentence of Scripture. And again, let's go back to it. So we're referencing John 14:27. Peace I leave with you. This is what Jesus said. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. So clearly he is saying, what I'm giving to you is not what the world is offering. But we in the world, we're constantly going for the next element of peace. Give me the next drug, the next fix, the next alcohol, the next whatever. We need that peace. I need to chill. So we're going for the world. And he's saying, no, I do not give to you as the world gives. And then he says, do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. So clearly, if we're choosing God, we're choosing a different path than the world.
Mm-hmm. And on the other side, because where this takes me in my mind is the peace that I experience in the the kind of craziness of being at the exorcism sessions. I
Sure.
actually, I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because it's
definitely.
and I've had the opportunity to work in the prison system here in Pennsylvania, in the state prisons, in some pretty stressful situations. And I'm not saying they're more stressful than other people's. Everybody has their stresses, and soldiers that have been in combat, like, my hat's off to you. You've been in the worst stress. But it gives you a chance to really learn how to monitor yourself and how you're reacting to things, both in the moment and in your general life. Like when you see the stress ramping up and you realize, I'm putting on a little bit of weight, and I notice my temper's getting shorter and I'm not sleeping as well. And so that interior peace, it's not just in the moment of like, okay, I count to 10 and take a deep breath and I'll get through this. But if I let myself keep getting ramped up like that over and over and over, it starts taking a wider toll.
I would love to hear about your stories and your experience of the work that you do on a regular basis. I think it helps all of us when we can. I mean, we're not going to be able to be, doing the work that you do, right? Or most of us, we're not going to ever experience it. So when you share things, I think it really helps us to open up a certain aspect of our growth spiritually. And that's really important, Adam. So thank you for doing that. I know you're kind of a private person. So for you to do that for us, I think is a real gift.
Well, Deb, one of the lessons that, and Jesus is, working on everybody in every situation all the time. What I mean is, like, there's gears turning where everybody is being helped, everybody's experiencing conversion. And so when we do the exorcism sessions, and that's
every Friday. We have new listeners, so every Friday you're in exorcism. Okay, maybe do give us a little understanding of what you do.
Right. So I'm a lay person. I'm not an exorcist, but I've been assisting and training exorcists now for about 20 years. And I've assisted at well more than 1,000 for sure, probably close to 2,000 exorcisms over these 20 years. And we do them every week. So it's just a normal part of life. But what isn't the normal part of life is, and what I mean by that, it's normalized for me. It's just, that's what Fridays are about. But the experiences there, the curtain is kind of pulled back to some extent in terms of between the physical and the spiritual. And the enemy is there in a body. They can talk, they can punch you and bite you and scratch you and tackle you and take you to the floor and all that. Though they typically don't get that rough super frequently, but it happens. And that's no big deal. That all rolls off your back. And what I've realized in those moments, Deb, and this has been a gift that God's given me, one of the many gifts of praying intensely in these situations, is you're so acutely aware of the presence of God and God's authority over all things. Like, if you didn't really fully trust Jesus, and the analogy I use is push all your chips in, and I don't gamble, but I think everybody gets that. Like, if you just risk it all and give it all to God, if you do that and you make that commitment, you're free in that moment, because the enemy, and I don't talk about the gory details because it's just too ugly, but the enemy does try to rattle us, to scare us, to say shocking things, to lie about us, to the other people in the room, to, claim to be outing horrible sins or manipulating or playing on people's pride sometimes. They have all kinds of games. And in the midst of all that, if you realize, like, okay, I'm kind of living in a movie right now, and this is, so-and-so from the Old Testament, and they seems to really be them, and like, this is very surreal, and this thing's threatening my life for the umpteenth time, that I've heard this. You basically have to just turn to the tabernacle and just focus on God, and I trust you, and keep praying and ignore it. And
so it's a lesson in trust that you go through every week. Okay.
Now, I'll share with you something very personal. And I don't think I've told you this before, but I was in a session many years ago now down in Oklahoma, and it was really intense. It was really, really violent, and it would rattle you. I mean, you were seeing things that would rattle you, and I don't want to get into details, but there was a paramedic involved. You can figure some things out from there.
Oh boy. Okay.
So
it was heavy.
It was heavy.
Okay.
And in the midst of that, God gave me a gift that I've been really grateful for. And I guess I won't share. I guess it's maybe too personal to describe it too much, but
okay.
In my mind,
whatever you feel comfortable. Okay.
In my mind, interiorly, I kind of had an image in my mind, just in your imagination, like imagine a really holy church that you've been in, for instance. And imagine being in there in the peace and quiet and this being centered there and, maybe seeing the monstrance and just being still in that moment. And when this really loud, scary, even on the, very human level stuff is going on around me, interiorly, I was like, shown this peaceful place, and I felt like I was in that peaceful place in my imagination.
Wow.
And it stayed with me ever since then. Like anytime I kind of try to remember that or think about it, I'm right there in the same detail, in the same stillness and the quiet. And so it was a real gift. It gave me a place in my meditation to go when things are really, really loud and crazy and distracting, and the drama of it all, you're on the verge of being rattled.
Do you think God gave you that gift because he knew that you were just going to be in really difficult sessions and difficult times, and he wanted you to circle back to that place so you can stay in that interior peace?
Yeah, I mean, increasingly, I've come to realize, this is just my perspective, everything God is doing is for our conversion, ultimately, in his providence and in his plan for our lives. So I definitely see things like that as a gift, and the goal is for my own conversion, not just to give me a tool to help me in these crazy situations, but to say, stay focused on me, stay with me in the midst of this, and you don't need to worry about what's going on. Like, do your job, do what you need to do, but interiorly be at peace.
Don't get rattled.
Yeah, and there's no need to get rattled, because if you're with God, like, there's nothing that can rattle you, because everything is his creation, and anything that's happening, it's either his will or he's allowing it, and that's his permissive will. And so, I've been in situations, as an example, where, and I've told you this before, it was my job to hold one arm and one hand, and the spouse was on the other side of the person. We were on a couch.
Of the possessed individual.
The possessed individual, right. Okay. So, father's standing, and they managed to squirm around and wrap their hand around my one finger. They got the best of me, they got out of my grip and wrapped their hand around my one finger. So they had the death grip on that finger. And I'm thinking, they're just going to break my finger. And I'm sitting there, and the thing's turned, and it's looking at me, and it's, really angry. And I remember thinking in my mind, Lord, basically help.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Help me. Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. And its hand started shaking and vibrating, and then it let go. And then I was able to grab the hand and get it back under control. Mm-hmm. And it never was able to do anything. And that was one of those moments I always go back to, where when there's trouble in life and there's threats in life, God is still in control. And yes, bad things happen. Sometimes the threats do happen, and sometimes we do get the disease, or, things don't go our way. But in hindsight later, ultimately, I do believe, and it sounds cheesy, everything is for our conversion in the end. There's lessons in every experience that we have. We may not see them in the moment.
Right.
It may take years to unpack them and discover them. but there's reasons for the things that happen in life.
So through it all, even though there's chaos all around us, we stay focused, we get in a state of grace, stay in a state of grace, so we stay connected to God, and God's in control, and we have peace in that. Okay, Adam, I think that was fantastic of the next right thing, and we are going to send it back to Keith for the rest of Morning Joy. But Adam, have a beautiful and blessed day. We'll see you tomorrow, and now back to Keith.